Senator, for me, I'd be happy to. Yes.
Secretary, as you mentioned, next week the Senate's going to vote on the Farm Bill. The good news is in the House they didn't cut SNAP program by $39 billion. The Senate wanted to do $4 billion. It seems as though the House bill came out with about $8 billion in SNAP cuts somewhere in there. Can you put some sort of human dimension on that in terms of nationally what it means, and if Senator Brown can add what it means to Ohio families that...
You know, I may put a slightly different twist on that. Essentially what the House and the Senate are prepared to do is to essentially make a program that has been somewhat questionable a little bit more stable and secure, which is we have low-income heating assistance programs in this country to help folks who can't afford the heat during the winter. If you qualify today for $1 a month of benefits under that program, you automatically qualify for full SNAP benefits. The reality is that there may very well be people that if they went through the traditional normal way of applying for SNAP would not be able to get SNAP because their income actually is high, but because of the way in which the low-income heating assistance program is administered, they qualify for that program. What this does is it raises that threshold from $1 to $20. Now, what I would say in response to that is this places the responsibility on the USDA to make sure that we do a better job in the northeastern states and the states where this low-income heating assistance is prevalent to ensure that those who would otherwise be qualified for SNAP get the benefits. So I don't know at the end of the day whether it's going to be an $8 billion savings or not. But what I will tell you is it's a whole lot better than what the House had proposed, which would have eliminated 2 to 3 million people from the program, and that would have been extremely difficult for us to overcome.
And I would add from the Ohio perspective that the states that were doing what Secretary Vilsack mentioned are mostly, I mean, New York is a huge percentage of those dollars in those beneficiaries. Ohio isn't. So there will essentially be no cuts in Ohio. We beat back the $40 billion cuts, then we beat back their next offer, $20 billion cuts. And keep in mind always on SNAP, most SNAP beneficiaries are seniors, they're disabled people, they're children, and they're people making $9 and $10 an hour that don't have the nutrition they need because they're in such low-income jobs. So to really fix this, you do what we did in I think overall in the Farm Bill. You raise the minimum wage, you extend unemployment benefits. That puts a lot of money into the economy. Henry Ford, literally 100 years ago this month, January 1914, announced he was going to start paying every worker in his Ford plants $5 a day, not because he was a particularly generous man. I think history probably suggests maybe otherwise, but that Henry Ford understood you put money in workers' pockets as unemployment insurance does, as minimum wage does, and it grows the economy. And that's sort of, we start with that, with all of with food stamps and other things.
92% of the people that receive SNAP are the folks that the Senator just identified, 92%. And for the 8% that are able-bodied that could potentially be working, we and the states who administer the SNAP program have to do a much better job connecting those folks to work opportunities that exist and those folks want those opportunities. We haven't done a good enough job of that, but this Farm Bill basically gives us the resources and the direction to work with a few states to do a better job of connecting work opportunities with those who seek work. And I would also say that in addition to the minimum wage and unemployment compensation, the earned income tax credit, extending that, as has been suggested, is also a strategy that will help provide a little additional boost, a little additional mobility, and help spur this economy.
And all this together is encouraging work. Earned income tax credit, minimum wage, unemployment insurance, it's all aimed at encouraging work and rewarding work,
yes,
so that people making $9 and $10 an hour can actually get a raise, can better themselves, can go up the economic ladder, and not be penalized when they do.
And you combine that with the work the USDA has in direct and guaranteed loan programs for housing, and people have that opportunity, the housing opportunity that's part of the American dream and experience. You have the new savings plan that the President announced, gives people an opportunity to put a few bucks away. You work with colleges and universities to moderate tuition increases and to provide a student loan program now where you're not being charged interest rates as high, the fees aren't as great, and the access to credit is expanded, and you create better paying jobs. That's how you're going to grow the middle class. That's how you're going to give people a chance to enter the middle class and stay there.
Mr. Secretary, I apologize for taking away from the emphasis here today, but I have a question on the Farm Bill. Pork Producers, National Cattlemen's Beef Association, concerned with the country of origin labeling issue. Are you concerned with COOL and what that might mean if it goes through the Senate?
No, I'm not, and here's why. First of all, the Congress of the United States instructed us several years ago to create a labeling responsibility for us so that consumers would have the opportunity to know where their food was coming from. It's important for consumers to know that. We made an effort. The WTO, the World Trade Organization, said you have to be more specific. You have to provide us more information, not less information. So we complied with the WTO. Our friends in Canada and Mexico have raised concerns about this. We don't think they're legitimate concerns. We're pushing back in the WTO. We also are questioning whether or not Canada and Mexican producers have suffered financially as a result of a label or as a result of some other circumstance in the economy or in the country. And frankly, if the WTO basically says that we haven't complied, then we have options to respond, which in my view will not hurt the industry. Exports in pork, poultry, and beef are at their highest level in history. Highest level in history. So we have record exports. So that would suggest to me that it's not quite as dire as some would suggest, and we've had record farm income. That would suggest to me that we're on the right track.
And I would add that Secretary Vilsack says that exports are at record highs of pork and poultry and beef. You couple that with consumers' right to know and wanting to know the origin of where their foods come from, and it works. I mean, we've walked the line in the right way with the way USDA has done it, and now Congress has done it with labeling in the way it ought to be done.
I think a lot of the concern is less from the rank and file producers that I talk to. It's primarily from the processors, and the processors are looking at this as something they don't want to do. Fair enough, but I think the consumers do have a right to know, and I don't think it's hurt our competitiveness in the marketplace. The numbers would suggest that we're very competitive because we're at record levels. Yes?
Secretary Vilsack, one of the things that you talked about during these 2 years that you've been trying to come to a new farm bill is producing a strong conservation title. Well, how would you assess the title that is in the bill so far?
Well, I'm excited about a couple of things in terms of conservation. First of all, the ability to streamline the easement programs will make it much easier for us to encourage folks to consider conservation easements. When you have so many little programs, it's kind of hard for people to know precisely what bucket they fit in. Now we have the flexibility to basically fit the program and the plan to the individual producer. Secondly, the ability to focus on large-scale watersheds creates a real opportunity for us to improve water quality. We started this as an executive directive, as an executive action. We focused on the Chesapeake Bay, we focused on the Great Lakes, we focused resources in the upper Mississippi River Basin, on the Gulf Coast, the Everglades. And now Congress has essentially blessed it, we hope, with the Senate passage, that Congress will bless that approach and encourage us to continue it and to provide resources to do so. That's going to have, I think, a significant impact on water quality. And we know it's working because a recent assessment of the Chesapeake Bay reflected substantial reduction in soil erosion, substantial reduction in nitrogen and phosphorus going into our waterways into the bay, and improved bay health. So that's a positive. And then the third thing that I would stress is that this allows us to continue the partnerships that we've had with great organizations like Pheasants Forever, Ducks Unlimited, the Nature Conservancy, a variety of folks who are interested in leveraging our dollars and their dollars. Ducks Unlimited just recently worked with us to create a carbon capture protocol, which is going to enable us to begin to market conservation to private sector investors who are in need of carbon credits. So it opens up a whole new income opportunity and a whole new way of leveraging additional resources in conservation. When you combine that with the work that we've done with the Department of Interior and state natural resource agencies to provide regulatory certainty, the Endangered Species Act, now you have 30 years of commitment from the Department of Interior that if the sage grouse, for example, in the western part of the United States gets listed if you've performed certain conservation practices, you don't have to worry about doing anything else for the next 30 years. That makes it easier for people to make the investment of limited dollars because they're assured that the government's not going to come along 2 years from now and say, by the way, you got to do additional steps. So I'm excited about this. And I think the fact that we're dealing with fiscal times and dealing with not as much money as we would like in conservation budgets doesn't mean that we aren't going to have as much money invested. We just have to be creative about how to leverage those resources.
I spoke yesterday with an Ohioan very involved in Pheasants Forever, and he's excited about this bill because of what the Secretary was talking about. And understand, I think that we don't talk much about the conservation title of the Farm Bill. We talk commodities, we talk nutrition, we talk rural development, all more than we talk about conservation. But you think about this state, there's no place like the Great Lakes, certainly in North America, probably in the world, and the importance, and we know what happened with algae blooms in the Western Basin, and that may not right now look like it affects Columbus, but it's very important in our northern part of the state, in southern Ohio. We know how important the Ohio River is, and we know in western Ohio something smaller but important like Grand Lake St. Mary's, and what we've been able to do with past farm bills, and especially updating with this in the conservation title. More efficient, not enough dollars. He's right about that. We want to do better, more investment here, but the quality of it, I think, is really working.
One additional point on this is that this bill also gives us the ability to continue the Conservation Innovation Grant Program, which Ohio has used on a couple of occasions to develop ecosystem markets, these environmental markets where you're basically marketing conservation benefits to a regulated industry that needs assistance. Tremendous opportunity, and Ohio, again, is a leader in that. So I think this is a strong conservation title, and if we could get full funding of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, we'd be in good shape, Senator. Just a thought. Okay. Anybody else?
One last question. I may not get to ask this question to the Secretary of Agriculture again, but this has to do with two very popular crops. One is marijuana, one is sugar. There are some folks that think that marijuana ought to be taken off the Tier 1.
If you get out of here without question. Sugar's as hard as marijuana.
Some think marijuana ought to be taken off the Tier 1 list of drugs and sugar should be put on it. Do you have any comments on it?
Let me first of all address the marijuana question in a slightly different way. This farm bill does actually create opportunities for industrial hemp to be utilized on public universities in research projects, which I think is actually a good thing. There are enormous opportunities from an energy crop perspective for industrial hemp. So we are supportive of that, and we're hopeful that universities take up the challenge that the Farm Bill contains. On the issue of sugar, I think that from our perspective at USDA, it is about education and about making sure that people can make the right set of choices as they make food choices. That's why we've invested in a new WIC package that focuses more on nutritious choices, fruits and vegetables. It's why we've worked with the Congress in implementing the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act that really focuses on improving our school lunch and school breakfast programs, creating them greater nutrition. It's why I'm excited about this Farm Bill, because it contains just a 1 or 2 sentence paragraph that's going to have a profound impact on young children, because it now will direct us to create dietary guidelines for pregnant women and children up to the age of 2, which don't exist today. And if you saw a recent study that suggests that obesity starts at a very early age, this will give us the capacity to educate young parents about precisely what they ought to be doing. So there's an awful lot of good activity in this space. And so we will continue to focus on education and advocacy. Some may want to try to restrict, but I think if you educate people, more times than not, people are going to make the right choice for themselves and their family.
Great, thanks.
Thank you all.